Assalamu alaikum. I'm Major Durrani, co-chair of the DNC Interfaith Council. Thank you for joining us today. We have an interesting and exciting show today. This is day 2 of the Interfaith Council, and my co-chair, Sarah Levin, will go over the entire program with you. But we'll first off start with the Muslim dua or invocation. I'm going to invite Imam Makram Al-Amin of the Masjid An-Nur in Minneapolis, Minnesota, to please give the invocation. Imam Makram, please.
Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Ar-Rahmanir Rahim. Maliki Yawmiddin. Iyaka na'budu wa iyaka nasta'in. Ihdina as-siratal mustaqim. صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. With God's name, the merciful benefactor, the merciful redeemer, all praise and thanks and gratitude be to God, the Lord, the cherisher, the sustainer of all the systems of knowledge, the most gracious, most compassionate, the sole judge on the day of judgment. You alone do we serve, and you alone do we seek assistance. Guide us all upon the way that is straight, the way that earns your favor, not the way that incurs your wrath, nor let us be among those who go astray. Our Lord and Creator of the heavens and the earth, we ask for your immeasurable blessings on this honorable assembly of the Interfaith Council. We ask that you guide our faith leaders, both women and men, in working for an America that works for all of us. We call upon you to give us the moral courage to be bold in this moment, pushing for a new vision for our nation that measures up to the best ideals written in the Constitution of these United States. We acknowledge and commit ourselves to our covenant with you to be a voice to the voiceless, standing firm for justice. We ask you, our Lord, to shower your abundant mercies upon our nation and the world, ridding us of all oppression in all forms and injustice, and this pandemic, which knows no bounds, nor limits, respects no distinctions of gender, of race, of socioeconomic status, or place of origin. Our Lord, we humbly and humble ourselves before you as we embark upon a faithful path to honor the inherent dignity of worth of all of us. Let it be so. Amen.
Thank you, Imam Makram. For many in our party, faith inspires their activism and forms the foundation for their commitment to progressive values, whether it's helping the sick and the marginalized, the poor and the persecuted, the hungry and the homeless. There are certain values and ideals that transcend party, and some of history's most important moments have come when courageous men and women have decided to set aside political gain in order to protect those values and ideals. We are at one of those moments again. This is bigger than party. Our most cherished values are under an all-out assault, but this is about more than Donald Trump. Reverend William Barber has said that this president is a symptom of a deeper moral malady. Dr. King said to ignore evil is to become an accomplice to it. While taking health care away from millions of people is evil, targeting immigrants who have fled violence and natural disaster is evil, erecting barriers to the ballot is evil, and those who are ignoring these evils are accomplices to it. Thank you, and I invite Sarah to go over our program today.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Sarah Levin, and I am a co-chair of the DNC Interfaith Council, proudly representing the humanist and secular community. It has been a great honor and privilege to work with my co-chairs and Reverend Harkins to put this fantastic program together for you today. So here's what we have in store for you this afternoon. Our first panel is Interfaith, the Vote, an important discussion about how faith and secular communities across the nation are getting out the vote and protecting the vote in the face of unprecedented voter suppression. We will then have a panel discussion called Faith Towards Democracy, where our panelists will discuss how interfaith communities can come together as an interfaith movement around our shared values and our shared faith in democracy. Interspersed between these panels, you will hear from prominent faith leaders, humanist leaders, and elected officials who will speak to the importance of interfaith work in this moment. Thanks again for joining us this afternoon. And now I will turn it over to my co-chair, AJ Durrani, to get us started with our first panel, Interfaith, the Vote.
Thank you, Sarah. Interfaith, the Vote. For this November 2020 elections, we can't think of anything more important than making sure that every American can exercise their right to vote and select their representatives. We have a panel made up of faith leaders and secular leaders who are all trying to make sure that individuals who want to participate in our elective process are able to do so by providing them guidance, providing them encouragement, and providing them instructions. The first panelist who will come up and speak is Tatiana Torres. She is the Director of External Affairs and Engagement for the District of Columbia's Economic Recovery Team in Mayor Muriel Bowser's office. Raised in a ministry family, Torres is passionate about working for social justice while serving faith-based communities in the public, private, and nonprofit sectors. Tatiana, please go ahead with your opening statement. Thank you.
Thank you so much, AJ, and thank you, Sarah.
Thank you. We are into our first panel, Interfaith, the Vote, made up of 4 leaders of faith and secular communities who are trying to make sure that every American who wishes to do so has the right to exercise their choice of elected officials. Our first panelist is Tatiana Torres. She is the Director of External Affairs and Engagement for the District of Columbia's Economic Recovery Team in Mayor Muriel Bowser's office. Raised in a ministry family, Torres is passionate about working for social justice while serving faith-based communities in the public, private, and non-profit sectors. Tatiana, please go ahead with your opening statement.
AJ, thank you so much, and to Sarah as well, and to all of you that are watching us today. Thank you for joining. This is truly a moment in history that we all are being reckoned with, and time of meditation, both reflective and both external, has to be had. I am an immigrant from Colombia. I was born and raised in this amazing, I was born in Colombia and raised in this amazing country, and that I've now called my home. After 34 years of living here, the times that we have lived in the past 4 years have been completely unprecedented, at least in my lifetime. I came here when I was 5 years old with my parents and my brother, fleeing the violence of Colombia, a beautiful country that in the late 80s was struck by drug trafficking and the cartel. But I'm a daughter of the ministry and a daughter of faith, a daughter that believes in my Pentecostal and Baptist roots. I am a Hispanic evangelical. But evangelicals are not just white. Evangelicals are white. They're Black, they're brown, they're yellow, and come in many denominations and beliefs. You shouldn't paint us with a broad brush. And that is why I have to be specific to say that I am Hispanic evangelical. I believe in pro-choice and pro-life and embrace my brothers and sisters in the LGBT community. That is the essence of my belief. My Jesus didn't just die for white evangelicals because he himself was not white. We must not allow color to dominate the faith community and break us apart at this time. It is essential that we do not allow that. The biggest issue that we are facing in this election, and has been faced in America for a very long time, is that of racism. And I think and wonder many times, specifically over the past 4 years and after my time in public service and in the private sector, how do we get evangelicals to vote and move away from two issues that are simply not the essence of everything that we believe in? You see, it's very important for us to think about who is at risk and who is in the balance, who we are talking to, and why it is important that we make sure by all costs that we are being represented. These are values and ideals that transcend political parties. This is bigger than just a party. Policies that are systemically and fundamentally racist that don't belong or merit the support of the faith community. Conversations and voices that are being spread right now in our country that have no part. We need to support fair immigration reform. We need to take our kids out of cages into the arms of their loved ones. Criminal justice reform, educational equity, anti-poverty, supporting the social safety net. Being silent at this moment in time as a person of faith is being complacent. Dr. King said, and I think AJ, you referenced this before, to ignore evil is to become an accomplice. This is why in December of 2018, myself and a few family members and also some lawyers went down to the border in Texas, in Dilley, Texas, to the detention center that just housed women and children and the largest one in our country. And I spent 10 days there helping and volunteering women and children that were in what they called and what they described, and as we've heard over the media, even though it has tried to be silenced, hieleras and perreras, ice boxes and dog houses. This is not the American way or the values that we stand for. This is not what our faith talks about, at least my faith. In the Hebrew and the Christian scriptures, 91 times we hear about welcoming the stranger. And what I saw during those 10 days did not welcome. It actually painted a picture of America that I myself had never seen, even as an immigrant to this country. My faith is to love God and love people. And many in the evangelical community are taking a stand and forgetting those two principal values as we think about why it's important to vote and why it's important for us to be proactive and why it's important to pick leaders and elect leaders around the country, but specifically in this election in this year that have faith and that understand how important values are. Quoting those scriptures is not enough. It's not enough to say them. It's not to talk about God's love for his people and to serve like Jesus did, but not have that match up with our actions. We have to understand each and every day that it is important that as we come into this election, that faith is part of the conversation. It is essential that faith is on the forefront. There are many of those that believe and understand the importance of what it is to have values aligned with our candidates. And all that I can say is I'm talking to many of you around the country today, as a Hispanic evangelical, as a woman, as a daughter of a minister, as a naturalized US citizen that at one point in her life was undocumented. There's policies in this country that cannot continue, that cannot be reversed, that impact hundreds and thousands of communities. in the brown and black neighborhoods, and Asian and Native Americans. We need to stand up. If our faith is as important as it is as an evangelical, then we cannot be on the fence as to where our vote goes this year. It is not with the occupant that sits in the White House. We must understand that it has to be the man and the woman who have put their faith and their families first. And we know that is Biden. And we know that is Ms. Harris. So today I ask all of us, as we think about our faith, as we come together and pray, meditate, as we come together to plead, I think it is very, very important that we understand that our faith asks us to go above and that our values are important. And this does not match with what is currently in office. Thank you so much. Please vote and understand the value of our faith and our principles. And this goes not just for evangelicals or Catholics or Jewish or Muslim. This goes beyond all faiths, all people. We must vote, and we must understand that this election is pivotal because of the value system that we all consider, because of the freedom that my family sought when coming and the protection when coming to this country, because of the educational opportunity that I've had to be able to rise and be able to serve the District of Columbia. Thank you again.
Thank you, Tatiana. We are next going to go to Imam Khalid Latif. He's an adjunct professor of public administration and the executive director and chaplain, that is Imam, for the Islamic Center at New York University, NYU, a leading center among American Muslim organizations rooted in a pluralistic and inclusive vision for the practice of Islam in the West. Imam Latif, please go ahead.
Thank you so much, AJ. And thank you to everyone at the DNC for having me today, as well as my co-panelists here. My religion is one that teaches its practitioner to strive towards growth in hopes of reaching their highest potential. This idea is realized only through the acknowledgement that all humans, myself included, have not only their imperfections, but also the ability to change and grow. Those that benefit from this realization tend to be those that are then willing to embrace self-change in their respective lives, as opposed to those who feign perfection themselves, or even worse, can only see the perceived flaws in others and overwhelm that perception with the unfortunate belief that people cannot change. This idea can be applied to candidates for political office at every level as well. Just as there are no perfect humans, so too there are no perfect candidates who, at the end of the day, are also just human. As a voter, our ballot should not be cast for the ones that we deem to be perfect in every way, or pretend as if they somehow are, but rather to gauge who will be the most willing to evolve in their stances on issues and who will maintain accountability to each of us as voting members of this country so that our experiences as minorities are not disregarded in any way, shape, or form. Our current administration does not reflect that willingness, and it is clear that the next 4 years will just bring more of the same unless Donald Trump is voted out. Whether we directly experienced impact from them or not, our country has shown a lot of symptoms in the past few months of systems that are suffering from ailments around race and class that need to be addressed. Just yesterday alone, 1,205 Americans died from COVID-19, and 39,794 new cases were reported. In the coming days, we will likely see that many more people pass away and many more fall ill. So much of this could have been prevented if we had leadership that had any semblance of accountability to the people it claims to serve. More than 40 million people lost their jobs and found themselves with no means for rent, food, clothing, or really anything at all. While policymakers took their time in creating a stimulus package that didn't end up offering that much at all. With job loss and other factors, 5.4 million people lost healthcare in our country in the midst of global pandemic. This is in addition to the already 27 million people without it. No other country in the world deprived their citizens of access to medical treatment. because their healthcare systems were already providing for them before COVID-19, and they simply just continued to do so. We right now have Americans in hospitals who are asking their doctors as they are wrestling with death how much they will have to pay for getting intubated because their worry from having no health care in America is greater than the pain caused by corona. And as of today, 172,000 Americans have now died due to COVID-19. And Donald Trump has still not honored them in any way. 2.3 million people are incarcerated in the United States of America, more than any other country in the world, many of whom have not been convicted for anything. They simply cannot afford the bail to release them. Many sit in infected American prisons despite their infractions being tied to actions that are no longer even considered a crime. Many are minorities, mostly those who self-identify as Black. Essential workers have done so much for us these last few months, whether we are aware of it or not. Many of them are from amongst the undocumented. And these undocumented people who contribute to our society in so many essential roles weren't even considered human enough to receive a US government stimulus check. And even today, children sit in cages at our borders. A global pandemic became necessary for this March to be the first March since 2002 that no school shooting took place in this country, since all schools were closed due to COVID-19. Our first responders and essential workers went months with no personal protective equipment while we sent billions of dollars in weapons overseas. Dollars have dictated decisions. Ethics and morals are put to the side and most sway in whichever direction the winds of the privilege blow them in. And as so many cities across our country have shown us that the ailment of racism is as deeply entrenched as ever within every structure and system of our country, where even a global pandemic does not give Black people respite from police brutality. And those that these days took from us include the names of George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, and Breonna Taylor, whose murderers have still not been arrested. In just these last months, we have seen our entire healthcare system, prison system, educational system, justice system, welfare system, and every system is proof of how Black life does not matter, and minorities of all backgrounds are considered less than their privileged counterparts. Elections are determined by those who participate in them. And of the many paradoxes of choice is that when we do not choose, we essentially have chosen. You and I have to choose what our role is in remedying all of this. And that choice has to be rooted in voting for the candidate that is willing to change in hopes of reaching the common good. I don't believe we have seen that at all in Donald Trump and Mike Pence. I do believe we have seen it with Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. Be sure to do your part this November and use your vote. It will make a difference in what tomorrow looks like for so many of us. Thank you.
Thank you, Imam Khalid Latif. Our next panelist is Reverend Ashley Horan. She is the Organizing Strategy Director of the Unitarian Universalist Association, the central group of the UU religious movement in the United States. At the UUA, Reverend Horan works with a team of faithful organizers and movement builders to shape the justice work of Unitarian Universalism to be spiritually grounded and politically effective. Reverend Horan, please go ahead.
Thank you so much. And to my esteemed panelist colleagues here, it's such a pleasure and a privilege to be asked to be in this space. I'm speaking today as an individual who cares very, very much about the fate of our democracy. And I also care deeply about the role of religious and spiritual communities in building a world in which all people are free and flourishing. And while I'm not speaking on behalf of my institution today, my reflections are shaped by my experience as the Organizing Strategy Director of the Unitarian Universalist Association. And I'm here today to talk about not just the ways in which we can as individuals exercise our votes, but the ways that we as communities, in particular spiritual and faith communities, can organize not just our own walls, but our communities more broadly to interfaith the vote. As my colleagues have already mentioned, these 2020 elections are more important than any other, perhaps in living history. We are unquestionably watching the rise of authoritarianism and fascism, both here in the US and abroad. And at the same time, we're watching these inspiring grassroots pro-democracy, pro-liberation movements grow to mobilize people of all ages and backgrounds because people want to get free. And if these progressive movements are going to have any chance of winning, it's absolutely imperative that people of faith and conviction show up right now. We're called to courageously embody the deepest values of faith as part of mass movements to stop harm right now in the present, while we're also building a future where all communities are safe and free and thriving. Progressive people of faith can have a significant impact on these elections by shaping the public discourse. And for many of us in religious institutions, that means being prophetic without being partisan necessarily. And I just want to speak to the power of those values because I am grounded in the deepest beliefs of and the values of my own tradition of Unitarian Universalism, which include radical interdependence, democracy, the inherent worth and dignity of all people. Some of our bedrock commitments are to the richness of pluralism and diversity, the inborn right of self-determination and agency for all people. And it's truly a tragedy that any of these issues is thought of as partisan right now, because they should just be human values. For the last 40 years, the radical religious right has monopolized the public discourse about values. And they have pushed a dangerous and backward political and moral agenda. As Unitarian Universalists, my folks are framing our values-based work right now in terms of what it means to vote love and defeat hate. And to us, voting love means that we are working to mobilize not just our own voters, but the entire electorate for an agenda that is unequivocally pro-migrant, pro-LGBTQ, pro-reparations, pro-democracy, pro-equity and liberation, pro-civil and human rights for all people, and pro-sustainability for our precious earth. And at the same time, we organize to defeat hate. And in this moment, it's important to articulate what that means. And so we join in solidarity with everyone who is resisting authoritarianism and fascism, systemic racism and colonialism, criminalization of entire communities of people, extractive capitalism, white supremacy and white nationalism, and environmental exploitation. I know that these are values that are shared by many of our traditions, as my colleagues have already pointed to here, but they are critical right now. These values are a life-giving, life-saving, life-sustaining alternative to the narratives and policies of domination, supremacy, exceptionalism, and exploitation that we are up against in these elections. Concretely, I want to tell you what it looks like in my denomination right now as folks are working to shift the moral and values discourse. So we've been running a campaign called UU the Vote, which is a nationwide effort to engage Unitarian Universalists, or UUs, in bringing our values to the public square. So in deep partnership, we are working with local and national frontline organizations who are yearning for a more just and equitable world. UU the Vote is combating voter suppression, mobilizing voters, engaging in deep values-based conversations about the issues, and also providing spiritual sustenance as we do this work because it is hard. UU the Vote knows that elections are both national and hyperlocal, and so every single person has a role to play no matter where you are. And of course, since COVID, we've pivoted away from the in-person activities that so many of us have gotten used to towards strategic virtual action that'll keep us all safe. So in my denomination right now, we have UU the Vote programs in Arizona, Florida, Georgia, Michigan, Minnesota, North Carolina, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Texas, Wisconsin, all the places we need to be, including many more states and others, many more volunteers in other places too. We've got congregations having teams who are joining on Zoom together to phone bank every week. We've got folks rallying to support the Postal Service. We've got them lobbying for safe, widespread access to the ballot in every community. In June, at my denomination's General Assembly, Unitarian Universalists made 117,000 calls to voters in Texas ahead of the primary there. We're now hosting weekly phone banks to voters in Florida, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Georgia, in partnership with organizations like Wisconsin Voices, New Georgia Project, New Florida Majority. Unitarian Universalists have sent more than 60,000 postcards, and we're doing National Registration Day all the way. So I want to just conclude by saying that while electoral engagement is the strategy of this campaign, our longer focus is skilling up our people for organizing work for liberation that's going to continue beyond November. Because defending democracy is more than just electoral engagement. Unitarian Universalists are showing up at city council meetings and demanding police accountability. They're going to ICE detention facilities and demanding the release of people who are at high risk of COVID. They've marched in the streets in support of the movement for Black Lives. They're hosting bail and legal assistance funds. They're also hosting food shelves in their parking lots and opening doors to protesters seeking sanctuary from police and federal troops trying to squash resistance. All of this is part of protecting democracy, fighting on the side of the most vulnerable and making sure that we all have a voice and a vote in building a more just and equitable world. And faith communities are a huge part of that. And it is our moral imperative to nourish the souls of emerging generations as they grow into the future leaders who are going to address the deepest problems facing our society today. Thank you.
Thank you, Reverend Ashley Horan. Our next panelist is Greg Epstein. He's a prominent leader in the national movement to build positive, inclusive, and inspiring humanist communities. Greg Epstein has served the country's rapidly growing population of non-religious people for nearly 2 decades as the Humanist Chaplain at both Harvard University and the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, where he also serves as convener of Ethical Life. Greg, please go ahead.
Thank you, AJ, and my fellow panelists. You're inspiring. You inspire me. Yes, I'm Greg Epstein. I work as the Humanist Chaplain at Harvard and MIT. As a Humanist Chaplain, I work as clergy for humanists, atheists, agnostics, and the religiously unaffiliated. So my role is to help people create lives of meaning and purpose, of service and mindfulness, and of interconnectedness with what the Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. called the beloved community. So I'm really proud to be here as a guest of the Democratic National Committee Interfaith Council. As you know, many communities have faced terrible marginalization and oppression in America. Numerous faith communities have faced a particular kind of exclusion, right? But demographics are changing, and Americans are becoming a little more enlightened. And now we're seeing historic representation for many communities right here at this convention. And I'm thrilled that our non-religious community can be one of them. So to the Democratic Party, to progressives who care about interfaith dialogue and pluralism within the party, to all Americans, I want to say we humanist, secular, non-religious, agnostic, and atheist Americans, we're one of you. Well, actually, we're millions of you. According to essentially all the major studies on the topic, the non-religious are now well over 20% of the US population, self-professed atheists and agnostics numbering into the tens of millions. The non-religious are about 30% or more of young Americans and 70% or more among some subgroups of the kind of student populations that I work with at Harvard and MIT. And we're also extremely progressive. 72% of this demographic support a legal right to abortion, 82% support same-sex marriage, 73% say immigrants make American society stronger, 74% say that demographic shifts that will make the United States majority non-white by 2045 are a good thing, and 72% oppose preventing refugees from entering the United States. Now, that last one is especially important to me from the heart because my mom came to this country as a refugee from Cuba by herself with nothing at age 13, separated from her family for years by our immigration policies. And now that we non-religious Americans are finally here with a literal seat at the Zoom table, we need to do more than just show up. We need to vote. There is almost nothing more important. You could even call the act of voting sacred for a secular person like me. My wedding was officiated by a good friend, a fellow ordained secular humanist rabbi, and an atheist like myself, who flew all the way from Jerusalem, Israel, to perform the ceremony. In it, she spoke about the original meaning of the word sacred, a word that goes back thousands of years to the story of creation in the biblical book of Genesis. The Hebrew word lahakdish, or kedusha, literally refers to setting something aside as more important than others. So what secular things do you hold sacred? For me, it's the promise that I took on that wedding day as a recovering workaholic to make my wife and my family my first priority. And in our public life, nothing is more sacred than voting. Voting is the secular equivalent of prayer, of a sacrament, of a vow we keep to never abandon one another. By voting, we will this country to be better, one small action at a time, until small acts become millions or tens of millions or hundreds of millions of people who say through their vote, I'm here. I matter because you matter. We matter, and we vote together to build a more perfect union. So yeah, you can be a professional so-called non-believer like me and still believe deeply in the potential of this country. But I'm also deeply afraid that the nihilism in our country's past and present, nihilism which has come from religious and secular sources alike, is being weaponized against us all right now, and we need to vote it out before it's too late. Finally, can we talk for a literal minute about this notion that we are non-believers, as President Obama called us in his 2009 inaugural address? I mean, it was amazing to get that shout out from President Obama, who wrote in his memoir, Dreams from My Father, that his mother, Stanley Ann Dunham's beliefs were a, quote, lonely witness for secular humanism, unquote. For all her professed secularism, he continued, my mother was in many ways the most spiritually awakened person that I've ever known. And that's why, in a certain sense, I do consider us to be believers. Belief in our constitutional ideals, belief in human goodness, belief in service and in the sacredness of small, everyday acts like the vote. All of that is part of humanism and of being non-religious, and our community has so much power to help make this a better society if you continue to allow us, and when we work at it, when we vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Greg. We are coming to the end of our time as a panel. And one of the takeaways that I have from essentially a common thread that's run from our comments today is the encouragement for everyone, irrespective of their faith or non-faith for that matter, to exercise their right of self-determination in choosing their elected representatives. As I conclude, it comes to mind, I remember a person from Massachusetts, a young woman by the name of Nazda Alam. She is a national delegate to this convention. She was also a national delegate to the 2016 convention. Very active in New England, working tirelessly to get out the vote, but also then taking time to do something humanitarian, going to Bangladesh to care for the women who are being religiously persecuted because they happen to be Muslim in the country of Myanmar. And those refugees whose videos you have seen and on television are in very poor shape. So it was something really to see a person working to get the vote out here in this country, but then also traveling half around the world to to work with others who are being persecuted. So I want to this time thank all of the members of our panel for taking time to come here for your comments. Thank you very much. Have a nice day.
Shalom Aleichem. Assalamu alaikum. Peace be upon you all. And may we together shine forth the healing and transformative power of peace and well-being out upon our nation and our world. I'm Rabbi Benjamin Biber, and I serve as the Humanist Chaplain at American University in Washington, D.C., where I work with a rainbow of students, secular and religious, spiritual and atheist. Today and throughout this convention, we all connect with each other in our various places, drawn together by our diverse and intersecting paths to affirm our shared faith in our democracy and our commitment to defend and advance its capacities that empower us to honestly face and solve our national and global problems. From wherever each of us may draw inspirations to work for our common good, our deeds must find their roots in whatever sources of hope and love that uplift us and enable us to face our great challenges and work together for the healing and improvement of the world. Tikkun ha'olam. The breath of life sustains us all, and we perish when we cannot breathe. COVID has now taken away the breath of life from 750,000 of the members of our human family, 160,000 plus people in the United States, including my own mother, months back. Structural racism, other oppressions, and police using excessive force have taken away the breath of life for many thousands in the US and abroad, including George Floyd and Eric Garner, among others. Black men who were our brothers, choked to death by police not serving and protecting us all. The many such killings mobilized a worldwide movement against all such misconduct and brutality, a movement working for the reinvention of public safety based upon compassion, social services, de-escalation, and equal human rights for all. Economic forces prioritizing business as usual over the breath of life itself have also killed many by shortening the lives of those disregarded as expendable, the poor and working classes, the unhealthy and the old, and by discounting the full value of the lives of us all, each of us diminished to cogs in uncaring machinery of production and consumption, rather than each of us living with one another and the planet in growing harmony and respect in the beloved community that Reverend Martin Luther King envisioned. Together we can protect and heal our nation and our world. We can and we must cherish and defend the breath of life we all share. We are connecting in this perilous moment to be inspired, each of us to do our parts in everyday labors of love to help bring us all closer to realizing the visions of equality and opportunity, of liberty and justice, of peace and progress that are at the heart of the democratic ideals that unite us. May we all breathe together and work together to succeed in these worthy endeavors. Amen.
Yes, Makram Elamine, and it's just an honor to be here as a part of the Interfaith Council. It's, I think, so important for us in this, I think, this historic time that we're living in here in our country and in the world, of seeing so much that has happened to us from a political standpoint, but also just from the standpoint of COVID-19 and what it has meant to our country, to the world, really reshaping how we view and think, and our paradigm of life in this moment. I think it's so important for us to have these conversations as people of faith and really pull upon our faith that really transcends our particularism and really gets to more universal connections of value. You know, value-based connections, I believe, in this moment is what is needed for us to transcend this moment and really come out and be, I think, still a vibrant society that really invites us to be our best selves. It invites us to communicate and to really hear one another in a time when that is almost non-existent. You know, there's a lot of noise, there's a lot of shouting back and forth, but there's not a lot of good communication and being heard and listened to. And I think that we as faith leaders in this moment must provide that moral imperative for us to slow down and just first listen to one another in ways that we have not. I think it's just imperative that we need to look at this as a society, as a country, as a nation, and most importantly, as people who live their lives according to firm convictions through our faith lenses, our faith communities, et cetera. You know, part of the work that we do, and I think this crosses across faith traditions, is, you know, being voices to power and being that moral voice to power when things are wrong, when things are going astray, when things are awry, that we have always, people of faith, have always been the ones to speak into that darkness with light, to speak and really be that moral compass that allows our society to chart its course forward so that we can all benefit to the greatest extent possible. And I think that this is one of these moments that I tend to share with my congregation, that it's time for us to stand in this moment, to really stand and to show up. But the idea of us speaking to this is a great personal struggle. I mean, there are many people of faith throughout the history of faith traditions across different religions and theologies that have, to great personal cost and consequence, but yet and still saw it as their mission, their vision, to speak into the world of darkness some light. And I think that we're in this moment. I really think that we're in this moment. I think that we have to really tie those firm principles of faith and good works together. We have to tie them together. I think that we are seeing a lot of profession, a lot of lip service, a lot of things and rhetoric, that I would call it, that is emptiness. It's empty. It's not followed up by any real substantive thing that really shows us that we can prove our convictions. You know, the idea of faith and good works is about professing something, but your work is about showing something. And I think that we need to be in this moment. I think we need to be calling upon leaders of faith, leaders in our country, as people of faith. We need to be urging them, insisting that they demonstrate their convictions. You know, I have no problem with anybody who believes different than me. All I want, in fact, that's a comfort to me for someone who believes and have strong convictions. We just want them to show up in their best selves and want them to do the most for the most of us. And I think that this is one of the things that we're seeing in this time that we're experiencing right now, that the most is not being done for the most is being done for the few or the least. And I think that this is a moral imperative for us to speak to this issue. You know, COVID-19 has really, again, changed the dynamic. It's changed the paradigm, and it has further exposed the disparities across health or the economy, education, et cetera. It's further exposed already issues that were already in bad shape, whether it was education here, where I am here in Minneapolis, you know, food insecurity issues and other things. These things are further becoming exposed. And we have a moral imperative to really work to have the direct benefit, but then to mobilize those who are directly beneficiary to the work that we're attempting to do, and have them to be voices for themselves and voices for others. So I see this work of faith communities, I see this as a work of organizing, a work of activism, a work of mobilization, a work of garnering resources, again, for the many. For the many. I know as a Muslim, as a practicing Muslim, you know, there's a concept that what's best for the many supersedes what's best for the few. The idea, so we want to make sure that we are advocating for policies, for positions that make the most for America, for the people of America. And I think that this is one of the things that we're trying to do here on the ground, whether it's in food insecurity, affordable housing, mentoring, employment services, or any of the other work that we're trying to do here on the ground. Again, I wanted just to conclude by saying this is a moment for us to stand in this moment, to really stand in this moment. All of us, many of us, who rely upon text, sacred text as guidance, as a compass for our lives. We read these wonderful stories of text. And many times, we imagine ourselves as being those who would have been, in the company of Christ Jesus, or in the company of Muhammad, or in the company of Moses or Abraham or Noah, whomever. We like to see ourselves and envision ourselves as being in that company. And that's because we like to see ourselves in a good light. We like to see it, and I think that's only a natural human thing to do. But as the text will show, and as history will bear out, that somebody was on the other side. That somebody didn't make the right choice to be on the right side of history when it mattered, when it really mattered. And I think that as people of faith, I think part of our work is to invite and encourage people to choose to be on the right side of history in the moment when it truly matters. And I think we're in one of these moments now, whether it's the issues of race and racism has reared its ugly head just in such this devastating way here in my city, in Minneapolis, with the murder of George Floyd here at the hands of the police, or all of the things and the uproar that is sent all around the world. All around the world. There were protests in London and other places that were just initiated from what happened right here in our backyard right here. This sent a sign to me. This was a sign in that we are more connected than we would ever think. That the things that affect us on one side of the world are affecting us on all sides of the world. And America, being the important figure that we are in the world, we must stand up and we must lead. We can't go back. We can't diminish. We can't put our heads in the sand. No, we have to fight the issues that are not serving us and not serving the most. And we must recommit ourselves to being that strong moral voice in this country. And I'm inviting my brothers and my sisters and my colleagues, and I'm so grateful for the DNC for really hosting this opportunity for interfaith partners to come together and talk. I'm inspired by what I heard, and I pray that my words are received in the best manner and helps to motivate and inspire others to do more. So thank you for everyone who has done all that you do, for all that you're doing, and let's chart a path forward that we can all be proud of and be on the right side of history. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. I'm Reverend Derek Harkins, and I serve as the National Director for Interfaith Outreach for the Democratic National Committee. And I can't tell you how appreciative I am of all of those who are part of this afternoon's broadcast. We hope that what you're finding is the measure of enthusiasm, but also the measure of organizing and strategizing that must be a part of this election cycle. One of the things that I want to make sure we all understand is that we have the opportunity to make a difference because of the strength of our communities. And the way in which we'll make that difference is making sure that our communities are educated, organized, and mobilized. You'll be hearing a lot more in the coming days and weeks about those ways in which that will unfold. But let me just say that there are opportunities now to be informed and then to again be engaged. I invite any and all of you to simply go to iwillvote.com, iwillvote.com. It will allow you to know your registration status, but then also if you aren't registered, it'll allow you to begin the process of becoming registered. And also know that across the country, we're making sure that people are aware of all those provisions that will need to be a part of this very different election cycle. So we invite you now to be aware of all of those things that are going to help us to be an informed electorate, and an electorate that hopefully will make a difference for not only this time, but for many years to come. It's my pleasure now to introduce my friend and colleague, Josh Dixon, who serves as the Director of Faith Engagement for Biden 2020, who will tell you a little bit more about some of the work that we're doing on the ground to engage faith communities and beyond. Josh?
Thank you, Reverend Harkins, and thank you everyone so much for joining us today. This election is about both restoring and redeeming the soul of our nation. For us, we believe that there is a clear moral contrast between the Biden-Harris ticket and the agenda that they're fighting for and what we see in the current administration. And we really want to invite you, as Reverend Harkins mentioned, to be a part of an historic change that will set us on a different course, a course full of hope and peace. Along those lines, my team, in conjunction with Reverend Harkins, is working to accomplish three major things. One is we want to ensure that people of faith know they are valued and mattered to this campaign and this diverse, robust coalition that is seeking to create a better future. Second is we're asking people for their support, and we want people to know that. And third is we're going to make the case to faith-motivated voters that the Biden-Harris ticket is much more aligned with the common good values that matter to people of faith than what we're seeing in the current administration. And so along those lines, how can you get involved? So one is to continue to engage in our programming. We're so glad you're here today. We hope that tomorrow you're able to attend either our Catholic Mass in the morning at 9 a.m. Eastern Time, or you're able to attend our convention Interfaith pre-program watch party at 8 p.m. Eastern Time, and we'll share information with everyone about those events. We'll also have events happening next week and every week leading up to the election, including a weekly devotional every Tuesday at 6 p.m. Eastern Time. And you can text FAITH to 30330 to find out more. We're really looking forward to working with you, to doing tons of work on the ground, live voter contact, voter registration, voter mobilization, ballot and voter protection, to make sure that everyone's voice is heard and that everyone is able to accomplish that sacred duty that John Lewis talks about in his final op-ed to the New York Times, which is so appropriately titled, "Together, we can redeem the soul of the nation." We hope you will join us in that effort, and we look forward to being in touch with further information.
Hi, it's Cory Booker, and I am so grateful to have just a few moments to share my heart and spirit with people that are so critical, not just in an election cycle, but critical for healing the heart, spirit, and soul of this nation. What we do, the spirit we generate, is important, and it makes a difference. I'm sitting here in the Central Ward of Newark, New Jersey, the city I love, the city and the community that we don't mistake wealth with worth. I was taught by my faith leaders in my life to live proximate with the people, to stay connected to the urgencies. I joke all the time that I got my BA from Stanford, but my PhD on the streets of Newark. And in this neighborhood, where the median income is about $14,000 per household, a Black and brown community, I've seen some of the greatest examples of divinity here on earth that I've ever witnessed. I'll tell you that in this community, I see clearly that our nation is in so many ways too comfortable with vast levels of injustice that belie the words we say, the oaths we swear. We put our hands on our heart and we say liberty and justice for all, but yet we tolerate such obscene violence against the most vulnerable. When I mean violence, I don't just mean the gun violence that plagues our communities that we allow to go on, that we don't have a level of outrage about, that we are so far out of the global norm for the level of gun violence in our country, but I mean the violence of poverty. I mean the sin of allowing people's bodies to be attacked because we still live in a nation where children can't drink clean water or breathe clean air, or the number one predictor of whether you live around a toxic site or not, or it's the color of your skin. I'm talking about the violence of allowing people who need healthcare, mental health care, to have their lives instead treated with prison and jail instead of help or healthcare. We're talking about the injustices that we see, that we still live in pockets of wealth surrounded by oceans of poverty, where so many American families are struggling In fact, right now, as we sit here, 40% of American families with children are facing severe food insecurity. You see it in the long lines of people waiting for help, needing food. This is unacceptable. And the only way to solve these problems is for us to live our faith. I always say, before you tell me about your religion, show it to me in how you treat other people. Well, this is the moment we're in right now. How much longer will we be comfortable with this level of injustice? I'm supporting Kamala Harris and Joe Biden because I think that they will provide moral leadership. I think that they will not be comfortable with a nation that is falling so far short of our common ideals and our common values. A nation which I've seen in every moment of my life that we are full of people who love one another, but our laws and our policies do not reflect that love. Instead, they reflect a callous disregard for other people. Right now, we have private prisons where people profit off of others' bondage. Right now, we do things that other countries consider torture, like putting children in solitary confinement. Right now, we lead the planet Earth's industrial nations in infant mortality, in maternal mortality. We say we believe in life and liberty and the pursuit of happiness, yet we have levels of death in this pandemic that no other nation is seeing. Who are we? Our words do not define our character, not our prayers even, because faith without works is dead. And so I ask you right now, if you believe like I do, that this election will determine if our policies reflect our love, then we have to excite and energize people. Because I do believe, as Langston Hughes says, that there is a dream in this land with its back against the wall. To save the dream for one, we must save the dream for all. And with that, I want to end on the idea of a dream. In the three Abrahamic faiths, there's a story about Joseph and about how he was grabbed by his brothers and thrown to his death in a deep, dark pit. Many of us feel like we are in that pit right now. We are in the valley of the shadow of death. Well, the brothers uttered something before they threw Joseph into the pit, where he did not die. He rose up and led a nation through crisis. What his brothers uttered is actually written on the very spot in Memphis, Tennessee, where Martin Luther King was slain. If you go there, you will see words from our sacred texts written there where Martin Luther King was shot. And this is what Joseph's brothers said. They said, "Behold, here cometh the dreamer. Let us slay him and see what becomes of his dream." We now, my brothers and sisters, we now must determine what will become of the dream. It is on us. It is in our hands. We have no right to assume otherwise. We will either capture this moment and advance the cause of our country, or we shall lose it and plunge further into a nation defined by selfishness, by greed, by disregard to others' suffering. I know our truth. I know our possibility. I know the divinity that lies within the heart of the goodness and the grace and the decency of our people. And so I pray, Insha'Allah, Bizrat Hashem, and dear God, help us. I pray and believe that we can get out of this pit and rise on up and indeed make it to the mountaintop. And through our love, we can transform our nation from this moment of struggle into the promised land. Thank you, everybody. God bless you.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining. I'm Carla Braley. I serve as co-chair of the Interfaith Council and also vice chair of the Texas Democratic Party. And I can't go without saying I'm also an alumni of Howard University. And so I'm just so delighted to be able to moderate this panel, which is representative of what we're going to see with Biden and Harris and many women who have gone first in many things that they've done. Today joining us, we have Melissa Rogers, who is a national recognized expert on the separation of church and state. She's worked previously with our great President Obama. We also have Chaplain Tahar Akmal, who is also first Muslim woman certified since ACPE's inception, and joined Moravian Theological Seminary to teach in the chaplaincy program. We also have Vanessa Gomez-Brake, who serves as the first humanist chaplain. Again, many women having their first here along with Kamala Harris. And then we also have Bishop Vashti McKenzie, who will offer words to us today. And she is the first female bishop to be elected in the church's history of AME's congregation. And so thank you all for joining us. We're gonna just dive right in. There are key events that have occurred in 2020. COVID has been labeled as COVID-19, but we very well know it could be COVID-19, 20, and 21. And it's through the work that you all do as faith leaders that will help us to gain a better sense of how we join our faith work to move us closer to democracy in a time where we're being impacted with systemic racism and loss of jobs, and people some kind of way have to hold on to their faith. How do they do that? Melissa, will you join us in offering us some words of wisdom?
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Braley, and thank you to all the co-panelists. It's such an honor to be here with you today. And thanks to everybody who's out listening and participating in this panel. It's so important that we all be involved in this great effort to restore the soul of our nation. And I just wanted to say I'm a Baptist, I'm a native Texan, have that in common with Dr. Braley and now with my friend Bishop McKenzie, who's serving there. And so I'm speaking from that perspective, and also from the great honor the perspective of having the great honor of having worked in the Obama-Biden administration. And so I'm very excited about what's in store for us with the Biden-Harris administration. And I just want to say three things that I think that we can work on together to realize in the next administration. And that the first would be that we will all affirm that there are no second-class faiths under the Constitution. We all have equal rights as citizens, equal rights to religious liberty. Joe Biden knows that it is profoundly wrong to call for an entire faith group to be banned from entering the United States simply because of their religion, and to impose a travel ban based on that call. He knows it is profoundly wrong to appoint and endorse people who call for religious discrimination and who promote anti-Islamic propaganda or propaganda against other faiths. And we know that we can work with Joe Biden and Kamala Harris from day one to right these wrongs. As president, Joe Biden will rescind the Trump administration's Muslim ban and urge Congress to pass the No Ban Act to ensure that future administrations cannot restore Trump's ban. Biden will order the Justice Department to focus additional resources to combat religion-based hate crimes and to confront white nationalist terrorism. Because another thing we know is that Joe Biden knows that it's wrong to compliment people who march with the KKK, neo-Nazis, and other white supremacists. So we have to work together to restore our democracy, and the Biden-Harris ticket and administration will help us to do so. Secondly, the Biden administration will turn to religious and other civil society organizations as essential parts of the solution to the challenges we face, including COVID-19, the need for racial justice, and the need for economic recovery. And I just want to draw on a memory here. In 2014, when the Ebola virus emerged in West Africa, the Biden-Obama administration quickly called on religious leaders and other humanitarian leaders to come together because they knew that we were going to be central to solving this problem. We were going to be central to getting out good information, to helping people in need, and to working with those who were suffering. And that is something that we can look forward to too, that Joe Biden takes people of faith seriously and wants them involved from the very beginning on solving the challenges that face us. And thirdly, a Biden administration will restore other democratic norms. For example, Joe Biden knows that public servants should never be able to use their public office for private gain. He knows that a president needs to listen, and a president needs to reach out to all people of goodwill and restore respect for constitutional principles. So let me just close by sharing a thought with you. Some of you may know that there's a prayer written by President John Adams that's engraved in the mantle of the state dining room in the White House. And Adams wrote, he asked in this prayer that the best of blessings of this house be bestowed on all those who shall hereafter inhabit it. And President Adams said, "May none but honest and wise men ever rule under this roof." When we elect Joe Biden to serve as our president, we can once again say that this is true. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Melissa. Chaplain Tara Akmal, will you provide your opening statement?
Yes, thank you everyone, and good afternoon. I'm honored to be part of this historic convention and to have this conversation about faith and democracy. Historically, faith and religion has played a significant role in the lives of many Americans. It is from the diversity of faith communities in our nation that some of our greatest leaders emerged and imparted words of encouragement, faith, and hope. Laments and prayers for the soul of our nation and our country's leadership have echoed in the beautiful sanctuaries of America's houses of worship. I also recognize and acknowledge that there are Americans who find spiritual and well-being and connect outside of religious communities. They find connection, comfort, and meaning in other beautiful ways that are supportive and helpful for their lives. In this time of great grief and loss of loved ones, loss of jobs, loss of financial stability, loss of resources and community due to our isolation to stay safe from COVID-19, we as faith leaders, whether virtual or masked face to masked face, provide our communities compassion, support, and care while bearing witness to their struggles and suffering that we are facing together as a nation. I personally find comfort and hope in the leadership of Joe Biden and Senator Kamala Harris. Their vision and plan to restore the character and humanity of our government and to uplift our citizens resonates with me as a hospital chaplain. Presidential nominee Biden said in an interview recently, and I quote, "The presidency is a duty to care for everyone, not just who voted for you, but to care for everyone, for all of us. No trust is more sacred, no responsibility more solemn, no purpose more fundamental than for a president to do absolutely everything that he or she can do to protect American lives," unquote. As an interfaith hospital chaplain and educator of future faith and spiritual leaders from diverse backgrounds, I immediately connect with Joe Biden's words with the care chaplains provide at the bedside of patients. With the COVID-19 pandemic and families not able to visit their loved ones in the hospital the way they could pre-COVID, interfaith chaplains, Muslim chaplains have filled the gap and stepped in where patients have been alone and isolated away from their families. As an interfaith chaplain, I am called to be humble, curious, and respectful of others' expressions of faith, experiences of spirituality, and meaning. I am ethically responsible to do no harm and remove harm when people are suffering. Scripture from the book of Matthew and tradition in the Islamic faith from a Hadith Qudsi calls for us to take care of the sick as a way of service to humanity. After the world witnessed the death of Mr. George Floyd, as we watched the life of a human being being extinguished from right before our very eyes, there was social movement. As the Black Lives Matter movement and all those who support them has worked tirelessly to bring attention to the suffering and loss of life of Black and brown bodies, there has been movement. After the murder of Mr. Floyd, there was talk within the media and other circles asking, is this a movement or a moment? I believe we are witnessing a moment. Our nation has been hurting for the past 4 years, from the Muslim ban to peaceful protesters being harmed, and now tampering with the ability for our elders to receive medicine by mail and our right to vote by mail. We have been hurt by the ongoing racial and religious biases, rampant injustice, division and hatred, gender and identity equalities, unbridled inequities, and by silence. Knowing something is wrong, yet one stays silent and complacent as long as they're not impacted. The leadership we have in our presidential nominee and VP, Senator Harris, are here for us. They care for us, they want better for us, and they will work hard for us. For this, I am hopeful. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Chaplain Ahmad. Vanessa Gomez-Brake, would you join us with your statement?
Magandang hapon sa inyong lahat. Good afternoon and thank you everyone. Today, I'm calling in from the ancestral lands of the Tongva people, also known as Los Angeles, California. And I want to just take a moment to pay respects to the Tongva elders, past and present, as well as to call to mind the many legacies of violence, displacement, migration, and settlement that bring us all here today. It is my honor to represent the secular humanist tradition on this panel. The religiously unaffiliated have the potential to be a formidable voting bloc, and by partnering with progressive Democrats of faith, we can reclaim religious freedom from the GOP. So as a humanist, I believe in good, and that I have a responsibility for pursuing and bringing about goodness in my lifetime. As I considered the central goals of the Biden-Harris campaign, I was reminded that while atheists, humanists, and agnostics may not be religious in the traditional sense of the word, we secular folk are nevertheless committed to pro-social values, which are also at the core of the world's wisdom traditions. That is to say, humanism promotes concern and care for the well-being of others. Ultimately, religion is an exercise in community care. And similarly, democracy is a form of government envisioned by the people for the people. And as a country, we continue to revise our vision for the good for all. So my humanism is grounded by reason and science, it's guided by compassion, but it also inspires me to action. As communities, we are equipped to call into being the type of world we want to live in, expressing our values through action. So at the University of Southern California, I am the Associate Dean of Religious and Spiritual Life. And yes, the first humanist chaplain to ever hold this role. In this role, I also get to advise our secular student fellowship. And you know how they practice their humanism? It's through service. They get out the vote on the campus quad. They clean up the LA River. They pack meals for the people living downtown in Skid Row. And they gather medical equipment and PPE donations and deliver them to the Navajo Nation in Arizona and New Mexico. They even eat a vegetarian diet because they know humans have a hand in climate change. And they want to honor this earth and all its sentient beings. So if you ask me what the role faith communities have in addressing the issues of today, I would say we shall mobilize our people toward the betterment of this nation, being guided by compassion. So my family immigrated to the US from the Philippines. And in fact, in the last 4 years, I've had 10 family members naturalized as US citizens. I'm so proud to be able to say that. So in the Philippines, there is the concept of kapwa. Kapwa is a recognition of a shared identity, an inner self shared with others. Implied in such inclusiveness is the moral obligation to treat one another as equal fellow human beings. It leads us towards concern for our community, our country, and for our environment. I see kapwa represented in the Biden-Harris campaign when they speak of inclusivity and of unity. Today, articulate a vision of America where Black, Indigenous, people of color, and immigrants from across the globe are celebrated as true Americans. We are fully seen and validated as members of this great democracy. All of us, no matter our religious or our spiritual views, are welcome to play a part in transforming this nation for the better. So under the leadership of Biden and Harris, I believe we will see progress on a myriad of issues that faith communities have long fought for: reforming our healthcare and our criminal justice systems, investing in new approaches to community safety, and allocating money to build healthy, sustainable, and equitable communities for all people. We're going to see a revisioning of economic recovery in terms of community care. We're going to plan for clean energy future while aggressively combating climate change. And perhaps most importantly, in this moment, navigating our way out of this pandemic. They will deliver our children, our elders, and ourselves to safety. So alongside Biden and Harris, our communities should aim to build back better, improving upon our past successes and envisioning a brighter future for us all. And since I'm a USC Trojan, I'll end by saying, Democrats, let's fight on to victory. Maraming salamat po, and thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Gomez-Brake. Bishop Vashti McKenzie of the African Methodist Episcopal Church, please provide us with a statement today.
Thank you. Thank you so much for inviting me, Dr. Braley, and all of the members of the Interfaith Council and delegates and friends. I just want to share a few words with you. The former Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, Thurgood Marshall, said in a speech that we cannot play ostrich. Democracy just cannot flourish amid fear. Liberty cannot bloom amid hate. Justice cannot take root amid rage. America must get to work. He gave that speech in 1992, and it's still true today. America, we've got to get to work. We cannot remain silent. We can no longer sit still. And as a people of faith, we can no longer participate in infighting and pettiness that allows the degradation of candidates, especially Black women, to be defamed and smeared with ungodly characterizations without a response from people of faith and reasonable, responsible people like you. The deeply moving movie Selma is a powerful reminder of a time when just registering to vote could result in serious threat to our lives and the lives of our families. Yes, voter suppression is alive and well in America. It reminds us of the stubborn persistence of those like Congressman John Lewis and C.T. Vivian and the Dorothy Heights and the Fannie Lou Hamers of the world, whose legacies we are beneficiaries of today. When you hear graphically the thud of the nightstick against human flesh in that movie of peaceful protesters, it reminds us that we are the ones to lift the who is my neighbor concern above one's tribe, above one's race, gender, class, and religion. In other words, we are the ones who are called for unconditional love for all humankind. And the best team to usher in this season of unity in our nation that is so divided, this team can rebuild the integrity nationally and internationally. This team, Biden and Harris, can help lead us out of the shadows of 3 pandemics for all, not just a privileged few, but for every American. We have to go to work. We must find a way to give voice to injustice and the rage simmering just below the surface in all of our communities. And at the same time, remind us and ourselves and the huddled masses yearning to be free that freedom is still not free. You're going to have to work for it. We've got to go to work. We must speak up when we understand that poor education and no education in an information economy is a sentence to life without adequate resources, support, or power to provide for yourself or for your family. It means you are left out and left behind before you begun and possibly doomed to low wages, no wages, and a life of poverty. We've got to go to work. Access. We need access to clean, fresh water, food security, repairing the criminal justice system to work better for everyone. Yes, we have to repair the breach that is between Americans everywhere. You have the power in your hand. Isn't that what Kamala Harris said to us? We have the power in our hands. You and I, men and women of every race, creed, and color, we have the power to turn an upside down America right side up again. You have the power to be sure that human lives do not become political collateral of a global health pandemic. They are not numbers, they are people and families. You have the power to rid America of the type of leaders who are undermining our Constitution and our democracy. Our faith tells us, a question is asked: when did we see you hungry? When did we see you thirsty? When did we see you in prison? As you have done it unto the least of these, you've done it unto me. We cannot be silent. We cannot sit still. This is the moment when we rise and we say, we're done with this. So what do? Register to vote. Help others to register. Check your polling place. Get that absentee ballot. Get yourself to the polls and bring others with you. Be a poll watcher, volunteer somewhere. Get your mask, your gloves, get a chair for seniors. Come on, churches and synagogues and temples. You can have a table set up outside of the area of every polling place to be sure that there are gloves and masks and waters and chairs for seniors. We got to go to work. Roll back again the stone from the door of the tomb, O God, and set free the good intentions and gallant aspirations and the noble commitment long held hostage by fear and self-seeking ambitions. Raise us from the dead, the lives you gave us for living, and help us to live with them, with faith born anew and hope undying. Rally your faith community, rally your neighborhoods, rally your families, rally your friends and your enemies, and let's do this thing. And let the church say, amen.
Amen, amen. Ladies, I just want to thank you for joining the Interfaith Council. Once again, you've done so many things that's been the first in your lives. And this is another first, because this is our first meeting as the Interfaith Council. And so this year, we've done some things right. We're actually going to the faith community even before Labor Day. And so I want to end this by saying, just yesterday, we celebrated 100-year anniversary of the right to vote.
Yes.
I just want to end with this. Say any woman's name that comes to mind that has worked, used their faith to move forward, because I think we're going to need all the positive energy that we can have for Biden and Kamala. This is her first too. This is his first. And so I just want you to just say her name, whatever name comes to mind.
I say Barbara Jordan. Barbara Jordan, I was just reading a speech of hers yesterday talking about how, you know, when the blessings of liberty were announced to the nation long ago, some people were left out and weren't included in We the People. And we have made progress on that goal. But as we've all recognized, we have not done enough, and we have to make We the People stretch to everybody and include everybody for an abundant life.
Thank you. Chapel to her.
I'll just call into being the secular saint and visionary Octavia Butler.
Oh, wonderful, wonderful.
I'd like to say Lady Khadijah, the wife of the Prophet Muhammad. Peace be upon you.
Wow. Bishop?
I would like to say the name of Dorothy Irene Height.
Ladies, thank you for all of your work that you continue to do. It certainly helps us to fulfill the promise that was made to us a very long time ago, a promise to experience democracy for all people. So keep up what you're doing, and blessings to all of you. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. Greetings and blessings to all of you on the DNC Interfaith Council. It's a great joy to be joining you this afternoon and to be inspired by the panel that just concluded and to anticipate the other elected officials who will follow me in just a few moments. I'll add one more name to the list that was just shared with that last panel of Sister Simone Campbell. This is in honor of the centennial of the 19th Amendment, lifting up the names of women who have led the march for progress for our country. Sister Campbell was one of the nuns on the bus who fought so hard to make progress in health equity and access to better quality health care. And she'll be offering the opening prayer at the DNC convention tomorrow night. She's a reminder that change, progress throughout the history of the United States has so often been led by people of faith, people of different religions, people of different traditions, people who are humanists and moved by their commitment to ethics and to caring for their fellow brothers and sisters, and people of every faith tradition. As our dear departed friend, Congressman John Lewis, often commented, as he crossed that Edmund Pettus Bridge in the march from Selma to Montgomery, there were people of every faith tradition marching alongside him. There were nuns and rabbis, there were priests and imams, there were folks who were moved by their humanist compassion for their fellows. So it's important that we continue to honor that tradition that was part of the abolition movement, part of the labor movement, part of the movement for suffrage, and part of the movement for civil liberties and for civil rights. And if we're going to keep making that progress forward, if we're going to keep putting our hands to the sacred work of bending the arc of the moral universe, then we need to embrace people of all faiths. One of the things I'll be speaking to tomorrow night at the DNC convention is how I've gotten to see Joe Biden, my predecessor in the US Senate here in Delaware, and I'm speaking from Wilmington, Delaware. I've gotten to see the ways in which Joe's faith has strengthened and sustained and inspired him, and how it is his faith that allowed him to have an open heart and open eyes towards the needs of all who are neighbor. My faith tradition, Joe's faith tradition, teaches that we should embrace his neighbor, not just those who look like us and sound like us and are comfortable and from our context and our community, but a very broad definition of all of the brothers and sisters we have with us on this planet. One of the things the previous panel spoke to was the hateful and wrong ways in which Donald Trump, from his announcement as candidate to his actions as president, have used faith as a tool of division. His enactment of the so-called Muslim ban, its ratification by the Supreme Court, is one of the most alarming and regrettable things about these last few years. And it has been my honor in the Senate to lead the No Ban Act, a legislative effort to repeal not just President Trump's ban, but the Supreme Court decision that has allowed that practice of family separation to continue even to today in a way that harms and impacts thousands of Muslim American families and others. That's among the first steps that I'm confident a Biden-Harris administration will take to restore a sense of justice, open-heartedness, and equality to our engagement with the faith community. One of the things that Joe is most fond of saying is a quote from Danish theologian Soren Kierkegaard, that faith sees best in the dark. And these are truly dark times. We've seen so much of our traditions that we value, of inclusion, of openness, of a commitment to be a more just and progressive society, turn backwards. We've seen a nativist and an isolationist and a xenophobic tone taken at the highest levels of our government, something that I know Joe Biden and Kamala Harris will reverse, and they will restore a nation that we recognize as one that is guided by grace and by generosity and open-heartedness and a kindness of spirit. One of the things John Lewis often said was an African proverb: when you pray, move your feet. So however you pray, however you meditate, however you reflect on the goodness of creation or the oneness of humanity, it's my hope that in this season of service, in the few days we have remaining to this general election on November 3rd, that you'll unite in moving your feet, moving your hands, engaging with everyone you can possibly connect with and reach, and share with them the message that Joe Biden will be a president for Americans of all faiths, for those who have no faith tradition but are humanists and are committed to our advancement, or those who are of the widest possible range of recognized and established faiths. He is someone who understands the ways in which we are strongest, we are best, and we make progress when we welcome Americans of conscience to exercise that practice freely, and when we recognize and welcome all Americans together. So thank you for the opportunity to be with you at this Interfaith Council. I know we've got a great group of other elected officials about to follow me, and I am so excited by the leadership of Derek Hawkins and of everybody who is doing their best to connect us to the strongest and most open-hearted elements of America and of our best traditions. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Congressman Jared Huffman. I'm coming to you from the North Coast of California, the 2nd Congressional District, America's most beautiful congressional district, if you'll allow. And want to tell you how excited I am to be part of this Interfaith Democratic Council meeting that reflects such a fundamental American principle. The fact that all of us from all faiths, including those of us who are humanists and non-theists, can come together in democratic unity to advance our common universal values. I think this really is very much about this right here. I know we're not on the convention floor, but I want to use some of these trappings of a normal convention because I believe this really is about the soul of America. And this conversation we're having today is really at the heart of it. You know, a few years ago, I announced, against the advice of just about everyone I know, I publicly announced that I am a non-theistic humanist, meaning that my moral and ethical values are not based on a conception of God or a deity. And my decision to do that was rooted in my deep concern about the divisive and bigoted direction of the Trump presidency. And honestly, I also just wanted to be authentic and state what my own personal faith perspective really is, because I see so much dishonesty and phoniness in the way Trump and many of his allies weaponize religion to do bad things. Now, secularists like me see that weaponization of religion as fraud, and a growing number of religious people see it as blasphemy. But we are reacting to the same thing. With the same universal values are animating us, and we have common cause in working together. Because unlike the Republican Party of Donald Trump, we in the Democratic Party know that America is great because of our diversity. We believe people of all backgrounds, all faiths, including those with no religious affiliation, can and must work together to meet this moment of social and racial justice, to fight for gender equality, really to restore our nation's moral compass. So a couple of years ago, I worked with my colleague, Congressman Jamie Raskin, and we founded a new caucus in the House, the Free Thought Caucus. And our work is focused on a couple of things. First, to promote public policy that is based on reason and science and moral values. Second, to protect the secular character of our government against the encroachment, against the separation of church and state. And also to oppose discrimination against atheists, agnostics, humanist seekers, non-religious people, and to champion the true value of religious freedom all over the world. What I've been struck by in the last couple of years as our new Free Thought Caucus has identified some issues and policies and projects we wanted to work on is that many of our allies are people of faith. And that, I think, is because we all want to see real religious liberty, not some pretext that allows companies to fire gay employees or to deny women's reproductive rights. We all are horrified by President Trump's discriminatory policies that have undermined our institutions and the Constitution and our notions of civil and human rights. And of course, we all want to see science and reason return to our federal agencies. It turns out that reckless, selfish, magical thinking is actually a terrible way to respond to a crisis, whether that is a deadly pandemic or a global climate crisis that threatens our ability to live on this planet. Here in my Northern California district right now, as we're talking, I can smell smoke in the air. And thousands of my constituents are either evacuating or getting ready to evacuate because we have a new set of wildfires. This is driven by extreme weather conditions that is very much related to climate change. It is becoming all too familiar, and it's very close to home. With President Joe Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris, we have an opportunity to stop the madness and the recklessness that we have seen these past 4 years, to actually address the climate threat with ambitious and achievable policies to achieve a clean energy future. And Joe Biden and Kamala Harris are smart and creative enough to see this as the opportunity that it is, the opportunity to create millions of great jobs, to lead the world in key emerging industries, to lift people out of poverty, improve health and quality of life for millions of people in this country and around the world. So I appreciate the chance to share some of the universal values that animate me as a humanist. Turns out I think these are universal values that this entire interfaith community shares. Millions of Americans with no religious affiliation are good, decent people who share these universal values. And I think that secularists and thoughtful, principled people of faith need to start viewing each other as brothers and sisters, as fellow patriots, and of course, as Democrats, because this is a big tent where all of us are welcome. We are stronger together, and I look forward to working with all of you in this fight for our shared universal values. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me here today for Interfaith Council meeting. I want you to know that something that always inspired me in going on this journey in politics is our belief in God never leaves what we do. We pledge allegiance to the United States as one nation under God. When you pick up $1, it says, "In God we trust." The fundamental values that I learned through my faith in God, not so much religion, but my belief and my faith, are manifested all the time. And now in the current state that we're in, where we're talking about activism and the forms of our commitment to progressive values, whether it's keeping the sick and the marginalized, the poor and the prosecuted, the hungry and the homeless, it's a faith. It's a faith and a belief that I am put here for a reason, and that my values motivate me and encourage me and stimulate me to continue moving. There is a responsibility I feel for moral leadership. There are certain values and ideals that transcend party. And some of the history's most important moments have come when courageous men and women have decided to set aside political gain in order to protect those values and ideas. We are at one of those moments again in our history. This is bigger than party. I'm a very strong supporter of Kamala Harris and of my next president, Joe Biden, because I believe that we have shared values and I trust them. But this issue that we are fighting for today in this election is bigger than party. One of our most cherished values are under an all-out assault, many of our values. But this is about what Reverend William Barber once said, that this president is a symptom of a deeper moral malaise. That's what's most distressing. It's not just the obvious moral failing of a man in the Oval Office, but the failing of those who have the power to take a stance against him and have become silent. As you know, Dr. King said, to ignore evil is to become an accomplice to it. Well, taking healthcare away from millions of people is evil. Targeting immigrants who have fled violence and national disasters, it is evil. Erecting barriers to the ballot is evil. And those who are ignoring these evils are accomplices to it. This political movement that we have begun with this convention officially, the support of Kamala Harris for my vice president, my support for Joe Biden to be my president, It's a moment that demands that we ask ourselves and our constituents and our congregants, who's members of our churches, what are the values we stand for and what are we doing to protect them? From healthcare and the Muslim ban to the DACA and to tax reform, we have seen a moral resurgence and resistance to the policies championed by this Trump administration. When I saw the masses of people taking to the streets, screaming and demanding that this country lives up to her values of one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all, and just slapping us in the face with, we have failed. And it wasn't because of a political vote. It was because of the moral values of this country. I want faith communities to continue their long civic life in our country and in this movement. Faith leaders, your congregations have led in organizing for social and racial justice, gender equality, and progressive policies across our nation. This is a time where I'm reminding everyone, all hands on deck. All hands on deck. As my colleague who just spoke, Congressman Hoffman, his belief may not align his way of observing his values and the way that he approaches his faith may look different from mine, but our values are what align us. Our commitment to helping others and our commitment to take care of the poor, to take care of those who are hungry, to take care of those who are sick, allows us to lock arms in an undying commitment to bring forth leaders who will take care of this country. Thank you so much. And I'm looking forward to it.
We ask that you may take space.
This is Keith Ellison. Am I up? All right. Hey, everybody. What a pleasure to be with everybody. All my friends. I see Jamie Raskin, Brenda Lawrence. I think I see Reverend Cleaver's name out there. Everybody, I'm so grateful to be with you. You know, Joe Biden says this is a contest for the soul of the nation. Let's take a minute to talk about soul. Soul is an idea that is not about the detail, it's about something essential. It's not about the surface of a thing, it's about something deep down. Soul is an intangible spirit that defines the core motivation of something. And when he says that this is a struggle about the soul over the soul of the nation, what he's implying is something that has always been true in our country, is that the soul of the nation is clearly about decency, fairness, compassion. But there have also been people who wanted to shape the soul of the nation about tribalism, privilege for the few, and suppression of the other, and acquisition of other people's stuff by force. That's always been a part of the nation. It's been a struggle. It's been a contest. Those who wanted to choose essentially love, unity, inclusion, and compassion, and those who said, no, I'm going to deprive you of humanity and make you work for me for nothing for 246 years. No, we're going to exclude you. We're going to pass the Chinese Exclusion Act or the Indian Removal Act. There's always been a struggle for the soul of the nation, and no more so now than now. This moment that we're in now is truly a propitious moment in American history where people who believe the soul of this nation is about compassion and inclusion and generosity need to stand up firm and need to say, no, we're not going to back down. We need you now more than any other time. And we need you to remember that soul that we are struggling over, where we believe it is about generosity and inclusion. We need to assert that at this moment in a mighty way. And people of faith, including people who are secular humanists, as my friend Jared Huffman is, people who believe that in the essential goodness of human beings and the essential dignity of all human beings, got to stand up at this moment. You know, sometimes there's a moment in time when your beliefs are just, you got to figure out which side are you on. And there will be risks and there will be challenges. And even some people at these moments lose their lives or find themselves in danger or peril. John Lewis found himself at such a moment in March 7th in 1965. And you are in this moment right here, right now. Not just because of the Trump presidency, but because of the climate crisis, because of the George Floyd phenomenon, this situation where we have used the criminal justice system to impose a vertical hierarchy for the last 350 some 400 years, and now that is coming to a head. Your devotion now is what we need more than anything else. And so I just want to ask you to consider the possibility that what's at stake is not just winning an election. I know it's weird to have some politicians say that the most important thing in the world is not the election. I know you're used to thinking we're all about the election. What are you talking about, Ellison? You're off message. You're supposed to be talking about the election. No, what I want to talk about is more than the election. Because if you're in a fight for the soul of the nation, you're in more than a fight for the election. Elections come and go every 4 years. Elections come and go every 2 years. In fact, there's an election every year. But what I'm talking about is something deeper than the election. What I'm trying to say to you is that what we need you to fight for is something that surpasses the election. And that is the idea that all people have dignity and respect and must be accorded with dignity and respect. And every empty stomach should be filled. And every person who's in fear and grieving for their safety needs to be comforted. That's what we're talking about. And if we put those values up front, the election becomes a no-brainer. The election becomes simple when we put those core values of relationship and human compassion up first. And I ask you to do that and to remember and to say that Joe Biden is absolutely right when he says that this is a contest for the soul of America. It absolutely is. And those of you who have a gut level sense of the soul and the critical nature of that soul need to step forward and say, I will volunteer. I will vote. I will be a part of gathering the people in and leading the people forward on the basis of values. That's what we need from you right now. And I just want to tell you that people who've been guided by questions of the soul have always been transformative. They've always looked past an election. I'm not sure if Martin Luther King ever really thought much about 2 elections. I know he supported John Conyers, but other than that, he wasn't too much into the election. He was into the soul. He was into something bigger than that. Joanne Chittister, when she got on the bus, she was talking about something bigger than just the next election. She was talking about the soul. You know, my good friend Omar Suleiman, Imam Omar Suleiman, he talks about the soul, eternal, intangible, spiritual values that guide us, and so forth, with my good friend Reverend Barber, who's already had his name invoked today. So those of you who are on this call, you will do things that if all we're talking about is materiality, people would not do. If somebody were to go to Martin Luther King and say, look, son, there's been Jim Crow, racism, and slavery for the last 300 some years. You and your 26-year-old self are not going to change it here in Montgomery, Alabama. There's no evidence to make you think you can change this. But he said, I am operating from another set of values. I have a higher calling. I am motivated by the soul. So yes, we are going to have a 381-day Montgomery bus boycott, which will transform America. not based on what my eyes see, but based on what my soul tells me is possible. And so I just want to wrap up right now and let you know that yes, we're going to win this election, inshallah. Yes, we're going to fight to make sure that we do something more than just win the election, but that we win the hearts and minds of the people based on our relationship with them, based on coming together, based on generosity, inclusion, based on the need to recognize the essential dignity of all people. So let's use this election to build community, not the other way around. And let's co-partner in this election after we win it. Thank you very much.
Hello, this is Emmanuel Cleaver. I just want to say I agree with everybody who's spoken. I'm on a plane, and unfortunately, we're about to take off. So I just want to make sure that my presence is here and know that I agree with all of my colleagues and friends who you've just spoken with. So I'm signing off.
All right, thank you very much. I'm sorry we just missed an undoubtedly beautiful sermon by Congressman Cleaver, but I appreciate him yielding his 10 minutes to me for my presentation. I'm delighted to be with everybody here, and we assemble as true blue Democrats, but I thought I would start on a bipartisan note by invoking our last great Republican president, Abraham Lincoln, who spoke of government of the people, by the people, and for the people. And we know, of course, we didn't start that way. We started as a slave republic of Christian white men over the age of 21 who owned property or had a certain amount of wealth. But through social struggle and constitutional change, we've opened America up. But crucial to the idea of government of the people, by the people, and for the people is the separation of church and state. And I want everybody to remember what the framers of the Constitution were dealing with back in the 18th century. They were rebelling against centuries of merger of church and state and religious warfare between the Catholics and the Protestants in Europe that was every bit as vicious as the wars today in the Muslim world between the Shia and the Sunni. And they were rebelling against holy crusades and inquisition and witchcraft trials. And they wanted to make a break from the history of theocracy, which was basically the history of government, merging government and church together, which they saw as tyrannizing people in their private worship and their spiritual beliefs, and also corrupting and degrading government. So the union of church and state prostituted religion, it bankrupted religion at the same time that it corrupted and degraded government and diverted government from its real purposes, which require reason, science, data, and the construction of a public morality that cuts across different kinds of sectarian philosophies. So that's why our Constitution built into it what Jefferson called a wall of separation between the church and state in his famous letter, the Danbury Baptist, in the Establishment Clause, but also guaranteed the free exercise of religion. And in Jefferson's view and Madison's view, the No Establishment Clause and the Free Exercise Clause went hand in hand, because if somebody could establish a religion, that would mean that that church would be able to tyrannize everybody else and persecute people who were practicing different faiths. And so preventing establishment of religion was part of the protection of everybody's free exercise of religion. And Madison made that very clear in his memorial and remonstrance against religious taxation, where he said that in American constitutional democracy, questions of faith and religion would be between the person and his or her God, or his or her gods, or no God at all, but it's up to the person, and the state cannot interfere in that relationship. So that is why we have had what John F. Kennedy called an absolute separation of church and state in our country. And when he was being bedeviled and hounded and persecuted for being Catholic when he ran for president in 1960, he said, they keep asking me questions about my private faith, and that's not what's relevant. What should be relevant is my matters of public faith. And my public faith includes a belief in an absolute separation of church and state. And that's what should count, as long as I'm not taking dictates or orders from a church. And he was perfectly willing to entertain that question. And he said, I'm not taking orders or dictates from a church. But outside of that, matters of private faith are really between the political leader or the citizen and God, or no God, or their, whatever their particular ethical or moral philosophy is. Now, this relationship I tried to express during my brief 5 minutes of internet fame before I went into politics. As a law professor, I went to testify in Annapolis against the Republicans' attempt to write into the Maryland state constitution that marriage is between one man and one woman. They were trying to ban same-sex marriage. I testified about it, and the senator said to me, named Nancy Jacobs, Professor, you keep talking about equal protection and due process in the Constitution. What about the Bible? My Bible says that marriage is between one man and one woman. And I said, Senator, with all due respect, when you took your oath of office, you put your hand on the Bible and you swore to uphold the Constitution. You didn't put your hand on the Constitution and swear to uphold the Bible. And that is the essential mistake and fallacy that a lot of our colleagues across the aisle make. We have to understand that when we enter into government, we are there for the promotion of constitutional values, not particular sectarian creeds or dogmas. That is theocracy. Now, of course, people can translate their religious values, their spiritual values, their moral values into the language of government and politics, and we expect that they will, and we hope that they will. That's why we talk about a radical separation of church and state, but not a separation of religion and politics, because religion affects people's values and values affect their politics, and all of that is perfectly legitimate. I do want to say about that, however, that oftentimes our colleagues will say, well, you're not really opposed to theocracy. You have no problem with Dr. Reverend Martin Luther King, and you've got no problem with Reverend Barber. So when you like the politics of the church people involved, then you're for a violation of church and state. And I say, absolutely not. Because when you look at what Dr. King was fighting for, you look at what Reverend Barber's fighting for, they're not fighting to put prayer in public schools, and they're not fighting for a ban on Muslims in the country. They're fighting for, as in the case of Dr. King, civil rights for all Americans, voting rights for all Americans, a war on poverty, justice for everyone, a transformation of the economy. In other words, they have translated their moral and ethical values, which are rooted in religion, into a public philosophy and a public program. Now, what I want to say about the situation that we're in today in America is that under Donald Trump and Republican rule, we are in the midst of becoming a failed state. A failed state is a government that fails to deliver the basic goods of life to the population. And we see that in COVID-19, where the European countries, the Asian countries are securing the public health against the disease, and they've got the disease on the run. And in America, we lead the world. We got 5% of the world's population. We got more than 25% of the world's COVID-19 cases. We've got hotspots all over the country. We have more than 50,000 new cases every single day and more than 1,000 people dying. That is the symptom of a failed state. Look at what's happening with climate change all over the world. Everybody accepts the universal mainstream scientific consensus that climate change is a real, and it is a dagger pointed at the throat of humanity. And yet Donald Trump withdraws us from the Paris Climate Accord, and he and his party continue to propound absolute conspiracy theory and fallacy about climate change. He tweets out climate change is a hoax perpetrated on the Americans by the Chinese. And of course, I tweeted back the only rational response, no, Donald Trump is the hoax perpetrated on the Americans by the Russians, which at least has some facts behind it. We are in trouble because we don't have a science-based, rational, logical, data-driven approach to the problems of our time. And we can include our crisis of racism there, because what is racism if not a form of mass irrationality and conspiratorial thinking and magical thinking and pseudoscience? just like everything else that they bring us about climate change and about COVID-19. So what do we need to do about this? Well, I think Jared Huffman has suggested, I think Congresswoman Brenda Lawrence has suggested, we need a massive, and my buddy Keith Ellison was just saying, we need a massive coalition of conscience that brings together progressives, liberals, moderates, conservatives of conscience from every religious faith and background, and no religious faith or background at all of the humanists and the secularists and so on, to come together to defend democracy, to defend the Constitution, to fight for government as an instrument of the common good based on reason, based on science, based on data, and based on moral values that are not about propounding a particular religious dogma and creating a theocracy, but moral values that speak to the essential equality and dignity of every single person in the country. That's going to be the ticket for us to win. And our enemy, of course, is all of the conspiracy theory, the magical thinking, the president's quack miracle cures and calls for people to inject themselves with Clorox and bleach as a way to treat COVID-19. This is really sick, deranged stuff that they've gotten us into. And so we've got to restore meaningful public morality, and we've got to restore a embrace of science, data, empiricism, reason, all of the things that the Enlightenment liberals who fought for our Constitution wanted to make the essence of American government. So with that, I will leave you with the words of the great Frederick Douglass, who was a great Marylander from the 19th century, born into slavery, about an hour from where I sit right now, who escaped to become our great freedom fighter and leader. And he said, if there's no struggle, there's no progress. The struggle may be immoral, it may be material, it may be moral and material, but there must be struggle. Power concedes nothing without a demand. It never has and it never will. And I'll leave you finally with the words of that great revolutionary, globe-trotting, democratic patriot and free thinker, Thomas Paine, who wrote in 1776 this great pamphlet called The Crisis, at a time when people didn't know which way things were going to go. Can you really beat the kings and the queens and the tyrants and the kleptocrats? Could you really create government by the people? And he wrote these words. I'm going to update them a little bit so it doesn't offend modern sensibilities, as suggested by Speaker Pelosi. And he said, these are the times that try men and women's souls. The summer soldier and the sunshine patriot will shrink at this moment from the service of their cause in their country. But everyone who stands with us now will win the love and the favor and the affection of every man and every woman for all time. Tyranny, like hell, is not easily conquered, but we have this saving consolation. The more difficult the struggle, the more glorious in the end is our victory. That victory will be ours on an interfaith, interracial, interethnic, progressive, liberal, moderate basis as we move forward into the new century with Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. So thank you for allowing me to contribute some words, and I yield back.
thank you everyone for joining us today. On behalf of the secular and humanist community, I want to thank the DNC for putting on the most inclusive convention in history. I want to thank my co-chairs as well. I'm Reverend Harkins. It was a big team effort to put this program together. And I look forward to working with the humanist and secular community and our brothers and sisters of faith to build a coalition of conscience, as Congressman Raskin put it, to elect Joe Biden and Kamala Harris in November. Thank you.
Hi, just thank you for joining us. What a privilege and honor it has been to be a part of the DNC this year and coordinating and building coalitions just to get this first meeting off. This is our inaugural meeting as the Interfaith Council, and we look forward to the work that we would do on the trail. And all I have to say is, let's go and redeem our nation and let's start some good trouble on this trail so that we can change the White House and include Biden and Harris. Let's go together.
Okay. This is Eja Durrani. On behalf of the Muslim community, I'm grateful for the DNC to hold this first Interfaith Council meeting since the Interfaith Council was just formed last year. This was our first session at the Democratic National Convention. I'll end with the words of, just repeated by Representative Brenda Lawrence. She said, "We are one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Let's go and win this November for Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, inshallah." Thank you.
Once again, I want to thank all of you for spending time with us today. I'm so enthused and I'm so thankful for all the expressions of commitment and resolve that you've heard here today. One of the things I think that we can say proudly about the Democratic Party is that we are a big tent, and that means we're vibrant and we have a number of perspectives that all come together for what's right and just and equitable. I just want us to remember to go to iwillvote.com, to democrats.org, not only to be able to know about the convention proceedings, and we hope that you'll be watching tonight, but also how you can make sure that your vote really does count and is protected. Lastly, I just want to say I'm so thankful for all the ways in which we laid claim to what Vice President Biden has been saying about this task, and that is the task to restore the soul of America. I'm thankful that Attorney General Ellison really gave us an understanding of how broad and expansive that understanding of what soul is can really be. And I just encourage all of you in these 75 remaining days to lay claim to my own tradition and my own youth, and that is, I don't feel no ways tired. We're going to have all kinds of opposition. We're going to have all kinds of challenges that confront us, but we need to understand that the goal of what we are all about as Democrats and as Americans should indeed propel us and compel us to stay the course and do the right thing. Thank all of you for being with us, and let's continue to march toward victory, and let's continue to march toward a much better America and indeed restore the soul of America. Thank you.
Thank you.